Chinese cities owe much of their rapid modernization to the sweat and labor of migrant workers who move from rural villages to bigger cities like Beijing in search of better wages. In these communities, families are not only trying to make ends meet, but they're also trying to give their kids a better life. Part of that means getting a good education.
But why is it so much harder for migrant families to find good schools? What barriers in the systems do they face? Who's going the distance to make sure students aren't left behind? On this week's Making the Grade, we take a look at one school's relentless efforts to help students defy all odds, as well as another's literal approach to migrant education. But first, a one-on-one on urban education for migrant students.
The Chinese government estimates that 240 million migrants work in cities. Many toil at labor-intensive jobs, often for very little. They build the cities, they maintain the cities, but exist only as second-class citizens, mainly living on the fringes of the city, or on site in cramped living spaces separated from their families. They are discriminated against both by society and by the exclusion of social welfare benefits, like education. The overarching education policy in China is that K-9 education is free. But the 20 million migrant children who are trying to seek education outside their hometowns face more challenges than their urban counterparts. According to Tsinghua University professor Jia Xijing, the hereditary nature of China's registered residency system, known as hukou, means that for most Chinese children, education is reduced to a simple matter of potluck.
All their social service will combine with their registration. So that means when the people move from a rural area to an urban area, all his social service and social benefit still stay in their hometown.
Many migrant schools are located on the outskirts of Beijing. This one, a K-6 elementary school, has over 400 students divided into 10 classes. Now, many of the students here were born in Beijing, but because their hukou, or residency permit, is not registered in Beijing, they have to pay extra fees in order to attend public schools. Now, this can be a hardship for most families.
Let me put it this way. The government says that compulsory education is free, but the fact is, schools still charge for this and that, which means we still have to pay for extra costs. There's too much. There's uniform fees, supplementary class fees, and so on. I can't list them all.
These costs can take out a large proportion of a worker's salary, which on average is around $200 a month. Those that can't afford the fees leave their children at home, in rural villages, often under the care of grandparents. Principal Shen Jinghua has been working for over a decade to address this issue, and by securing private donations, helped open Tongxing Elementary School in 2005.
Our school motto is, study hard and be kind. We hope these children will not only be well educated at our school, but also develop a sense of social responsibility.
9-year-old Kong Youwu is a student at this private school, specifically for migrant children. Every day, it takes him an hour to travel to school. He's been studying some English.
Apple.
He says his favorite subject is math, but while students are drawing graphs into their notebooks, he seems antsy. His teacher, Miss Zhang, says students may fall behind for various reasons.
Students don't often get help at home. Their parents usually work late and don't have time. And many parents are illiterate and can't help with homework problems.
Zhang Ling says some challenges teachers face is the lack of resources and technology, and the constant need to readjust teaching approaches.
Every semester, the classroom makeup changes. Some families are moving back to rural villages, others are moving to other cities for work. This affects our teaching because it takes some time to adjust to new students in the classroom. We have to take into account their study habits and education background. The students also undergo an adjustment period.
Quality and experienced teachers are not easy to recruit when salaries are about 3 times lower than those offered at regular schools in cities. So the school tries to even things out by providing professional development opportunities for teachers, as most come from rural villages and lack teacher training. Though Tongxing Elementary faces budget challenges, their doors are still open, which is not the reality for many migrant schools, many of which operate illegally and constantly fear demolition. The routine closure of private schools has called into question local authorities' willingness to aid migrant communities. The government's explanation that private schools do not meet the criteria set out by the Ministry of Education seems strange when faced with the alternative: no schooling at all. The forced closure of private migrant schools has left many children without access to even basic education. But the education landscape is changing. Last year, Beijing municipal government proposed that by 2012, 70% of the city's migrant children would be accepted into public schools.
We're seeing that being trialed at the moment, and so it's very encouraging to see that that step is being taken. Infrastructure is still being developed to try and accommodate for that influx of population to come in. So it will take some time before all the children can be absorbed into public schools, but it's definitely something. It's very encouraging to see that something is being done.
Ying Chia works as a fundraising manager for the NGO Compassion for Migrant Children in Beijing. Because the central government allocates education funds to local governments according to hukou, or the number of people registered in the area, public schools find it harder to accept migrant children when they do not always receive extra funding to accommodate them.
So the policy is good, but now there's no enough mechanism to realize the policy.
In wealthier districts, funding is less of a problem. Here at Beijing Jingsong No. 3 Middle School, Principal Jin says every one of the school's 550 students attend for free, even if 30% of children don't have a Beijing hukou.
We've had enough in our budget, at least over the past few years. Just look around. You can tell from the facilities.
Like all public schools in the city, Jin says preference is given to local students and that in some areas, these students can fill a school to capacity.
Let me make this clear. We are a public school. We do take some responsibility for migrant education, but we need to first guarantee that all Beijing children can go to school.
So there are 2 problems for the migrant children. First is whether they can get enough education, whether they can receive the education in their resident area. And the other thing is that where they take the test.
The test she is referring to is the Gaokao, China's make or break college entrance exam. Migrant children who attend elementary and middle schools in cities often return to the countryside because high schools in each province teach to their own version of the Gaokao. Top universities and colleges in the big cities set a local quota, then calculate the portion of students to take from other parts of China. This again gives an upper hand to those holding an urban hukou, as other students have to compete harder for a smaller number of spots. Beijing alluded to a policy shift last year, but recently announced that current hukou regulations would remain in place. Officials expressed concern that changes would result in a flood of migrant students, reducing access to education for local students.
We believe that these migrant population, they shouldn't be considered as outsiders. They really are here for a lot of them, they're here to stay for the long term. They're not planning to return back to the countryside. So if they're here for the long term, they really should be integrated into the urban environment.
Hukou reform will continue to be hotly debated, but for now, Principal Shen focuses on the immediate changes she can make in her school. Ms. Zhang focuses on the students in her classroom. And Kong Youwu dreams of the future.
当一个发明家。
那发明什么？
发明飞机。
那为什么要发明飞机？
因为我想去天空。
Miss Zhang shares a tip she uses in her classroom to encourage kids to do their homework.
I check homework every day in the morning. If the students do not finish their homework, they have to stay in during lunchtime and a recess to complete their homework. Sometimes I will make them watch the other kids eat, so they feel a little hungry. If there are no mistakes, I will draw a smiley face or a star to let them know they did a good job. When the kids see the mark, they get really excited. Every day they check to see if they earned a star or a smiley face in their notebooks, and they will even compare each other's notebooks. If they don't earn a good mark, they get disappointed, and this makes them to work harder on their homework.
Coming up in Making the Grade, a school that equips would-be dropouts with practical skills for future careers. But first, a short recess. Visit have a less traditional curriculum. They're brushing up, and by that, we don't mean the basics.
I 叫张威，我今年15岁，我来北京6-7年了。
Before coming to Love and Hope Vocational School, Zhang Wei was in a private middle school in northwestern Beijing. His parents are migrant workers.
我妈妈是 小时工和那个家政，然后我爸爸是打点小零工，还给人偶尔装修。我自从我以前在那个学校，因为那学校是条件比较艰苦嘛，所以说学的东西不多。但到这学校来的时候，我发现我的成绩上涨了，然后呢现在也学会了简单的弹2首歌。 然后现在也能认识点英语，然后也明白语文课文中一些难懂的意思。这就是我的分享。
Zhang Wei is learning to make teeth implants. Like the other students in class, the intricate craft could provide him with a future that at one point looked bleak.
Many migrant schools here, they only have middle school. They don't have a high school, and then cannot afford to go to government high school. And also there are not many government-run vocational school open to them. So they just stay at home, wandering on the street.
She's the director of Love and Hope Vocational School and wishes to remain anonymous. To protect her identity, we'll call her Li. The class bells chime over this small compound outside of Beijing, where a dozen underprivileged teens live and study. It's here the students spend a year and a half training to become dental technicians, followed by a 6-month internship. Most of the students went to migrant schools in Beijing or were left behind in rural areas while their parents found work. Although some did attend middle school, Lee says they come to Love and Hope with very low academic levels.
We let them type in Chinese, they don't know pinyin. So we have to go back to teach them pinyin. Yeah, that's really hard. And like last group where we teach them Excel, they found they don't have really basic mathematics, background.
So the school provides the basics: Chinese, English, and computer classes. Students even learn guitar. Yet the focus of their education is dental lab training. As a relatively new field in China, Lee suspects it could provide the students with practical future job prospects. Students work to cover their own food costs, and donations cover education and housing. But as Love and Hope is registered as a business rather than an NGO, it's difficult to get that funding because donations are not tax deductible.
We need to pay rent every 6 months. Last month I should pay 50,000 for next 6 months, but I still owe owner 20,000. It's a big amount. A lot of work. Yeah, we don't have any support from the government, even the land, even the the material, the teachers. We have to pay everything ourselves.
The challenges are nothing new to Lee. The past decade has been just as grinding. Lee's mission to develop better education for disadvantaged youth began when she took over a primary school for migrant kids in 2001. The school relocated 2 years later during the SARS scare, then was completely shut down in 2006, along with scores of other illegally operating migrant schools.
The government asked us to close up all the migrant schools in our area, in Chaoyang and Zhejiang County area, so we obeyed.
So she faced the challenge of continuing to provide opportunity for the children while still staying within the city's legal confines.
When we were still a migrant school, we already feel that they need further education after middle school. Because most of their parents, they thought they all grown up and nobody really give them a correct direction.
Love and Hope opened in 2006. Its first location is shown here. But today, this is what it looks like. Late last year, after a weekend away, Lee returned to find the property completely destroyed. The government had zoned the area for redevelopment, but Love and Hope staff had been holding ground for due compensation over its prior investment into the property. The landowner had reneged on a 12-year lease. Lee sued the landowner and won. Today, 2 tents stand amidst the rubble. A statement that the landowner still owes the school $80,000.
We moved here last fall, September, because our old place, the whole village was turned down because of the development.
My name is John and I'm 23. I'm from Windsor.
John is one of Love and Hope's success stories. After studying here for 2 years, he now lives and works at the school.
I'm an assistant teacher here.
He also studies part-time at a local college.
英语作为我 my major is English. 就是08年来这之前，我也是挺迷茫的一个青年青春期的一个小孩子嘛。那时候就没想过要继续学习，后来还是来了就第一年感觉自己改变特别大，心里也很高兴这样子。
Urban development has forced many schools to shut down, but one organization serving a migrant community has a creative solution to dodge demolition.
What's easy to stack, easy to break down, and comes in all the colors of a crayon box? The Heqiao Community Cube Center is Lego-inspired. The centre serves the local migrant population in Heqiaochun, a village northwest of Beijing's 5th Ring Road.
Inside of these shipping containers behind me are classrooms designed to provide teaching facilities for the area's local migrant community. Like those people they're intended to serve, these classrooms are mobile and can be redeployed at any time. This revolutionary design comes in response to the harsh reality faced by China's growing migrant community.
The centre's launch marks Compassion for Migrant Children's opening of its 6th community centre in China. But it's the non-profit's first movable model.
Our first community center was actually demolished with the entire community, and so we had to come up with something that was flexible, that was quality, and that could be moved with the community if the community has to move.
Demolition is a constant threat to communities in China, as areas are speedily zoned for redevelopment. This interrupts education for migrant children, as many schools in these newly formed communities are shut down, sometimes with very short notice. Zheng Yun goes to the centre's free after-school program, along with most of his 4th grade classmates. Since kindergarten, he counts 5 different schools he's had to go to. It's all buzz as the students pour in. But when the bell rings at 4:30, there's an immediate switch to get down to work.
The center provides them with good studying conditions. Most of them are migrant children, so their homes are pretty small, and it can get really hot in the summer. Here, it's much better.
And so, CMC director and founder Jonathan Hirsch says the center wants to act as a support structure by operating in the heart of the community.
The social fabric that's been built up over hundreds, if not thousands of years in the rural countryside, in their villages, have been torn apart. And so as they come to these cities and they enter into these migrant communities, they really struggle to build back all the intangible things that make up genuine community.
The sustainable construct is much like the organization itself, which after 5 years finally was recognized this March with government backing.
We just signed a partnership with the China Social Welfare and Education Foundation. And what this partnership allows us to do is open nationally across China, and we're able to fundraise locally in China now. And we're able to provide tax-deductible receipts and benefits to local companies too.
A huge victory considering that operating as an NGO in China is not straightforward. Difficulties can arise due to restrictive government policies and a lack of trust. Beyond that, organizations without government sponsorship have to rely on foreign donors. Only 10% of NGOs in China are officially recognized by the government.
The country is just so big, and there are just so many levels of management within the country, and making sure we're communicating to all the different levels, that can be a challenge. I think the government is fairly receptive of what we're doing and wanting to find out too, but if they don't know and they hear through someone else, that can put them at edge a little bit, thinking why did we hear through someone else? So making sure that the right people know what we're doing, and so that we can continue to get support and continue to operate in these communities. I think that's one of the key challenges.
CMC estimates that 500 people from the neighborhood will attend over 3,000 hours a week of social and educational programs provided by the center. Programs include family and health workshops and teacher training seminars for migrant school teachers. One thing's for sure, the blocks certainly stand out, and Hirsch hopes they will affect as much change as they do the landscape.
We were scared that it was a bit too foreign or a bit too alien to the migrant community. Though our fears were alleviated, the kids came through, they were very crazy about the center. It was like Christmas for everybody, including us. Really, the center has become like a living room of this migrant community where they can come and build relationships.
Migrant education will continue to top the agenda as a projected 400 million Chinese, a figure that surpasses the entire U.S. population, will move into urban areas by 2030. Thank you for watching Making the Grade. Please send your feedback, suggestions, and any story ideas to makingthegrade@bon.tv.